So now, Michael, Cengage is a traditional higher education publisher. 15 years ago, it was called Thomson, so some of you may remember it as that. And Thomson and now Cengage were the first mover in digital courseware. You've been in the job now for about a decade, is that right?
A little more than that, yeah.
Did skills or workforce even cross your mind when you took the job at Cengage?
So Ryan, first of all, thanks for having me. Great to be here. And to answer the question in a pointed way, it crossed my mind. As you know, I'm German. I grew up in the German system, and we'll talk about this probably a little bit later. But when I took the job, I said, like, why is there only one way to the American dream, which basically goes straight through college and goes straight through a certain amount of debt that you have to accumulate to get the pleasure of going through college? I said, aren't there any alternatives? And then in the beginning, I didn't know, I was new in the job, and I literally got summarily shut down by a bunch of professors that were sitting with me in the room, and they said, like, no, the German system is terrible, it would never ever work, there's only one way, it's college, and this is what you got to do. So, you know, I was quiet for a while, and then I came back to the idea over time.
Great. So what was the first step that you took in the direction of sort of skills education?
Well, you know, when I took over the company, we actually needed to fix a lot of problems in the company. Some of your friends in private equity bought the company, overpaid. We had too much debt, so we had to restructure the company. Fancy way of saying we went bankrupt, and then we had to resurrect the company. So we had our hands full. But what I really fundamentally believed that the traditional textbook publishing model was broken. Badly broken. Because the way it basically went is faculty, the professor adopts the book, and the student has to pay, and therefore the publishers thought, well, we can charge anything. So we ended up with charging textbooks, one book, $250, $350, $385. Crazy. So I said, how do we walk off that and get to a much more normal environment there? And it took a long while, but we were there. We introduced an all-you-can-eat Cengage Unlimited platform, so you can get 20,000 books for $120, and the entire semester you can take any of those books. But to answer your question, we had a lot of things to do, but I always believed we needed to get to skills because fundamentally we need to give people alternatives to just college. College is great, but it doesn't mean that they shouldn't have alternatives. So we started to buy companies, grow companies, and that's what we've been doing for the last, I would say, 10 years.
What were you hearing anything from employers that were pushing you in that direction?
Yes. Initially softly, and then louder and louder. Employers were saying, we don't find the right talent. And employers were saying, the current system is failing us because we want to collaborate with community colleges and get, you know, the workers that have the right skills, but we're not getting them. We can't scale things. So yes, we heard that from employers loud and clear.
What about colleges and universities? Was it just resistance or was there encouragement?
Yeah, I always chuckle when people tell me, oh, the American system, the American education system is broken, it's fundamentally broken. I say it's not broken, it works perfectly, just not for the students and for the employers. But it works for the system, it works great, right? I mean, people are having jobs, it works. If you are, you know, an academic, it works for you. You have, if you're lucky enough to have tenure, you get lifetime employment, you have academic freedom. So I think the system was reluctant to change because it actually works for them. So there needed to be some external impetus about changing it.
So what grade would you give to colleges and universities today in terms of delivering what's most important for students? First of all, what is most important for students in your view?
Well, I would give you a two-part answer. I think what I would call the highly selective colleges and universities in the United States are second to none. They are incredibly well-funded, incredibly talented people, and they're constantly on the forefront of innovation. They're terrific. Interestingly enough, they base their brands on how many people they can exclude from education, right? If you're at 96%, you're really cool, meaning like you have the biggest brand. The rest of the system, and those I would give an A+. I mean, they're really terrific, and I think they clearly have a role in the system.
If you can get in.
If you can get in, which is a tiny, tiny fraction of students. The rest of the system, I would give, a C, and it's okay, but some of the stuff is helpful. It's definitely helpful. I mean, obviously, college graduates still have a better, higher happiness level, better income level, etc. But it's not that they're producing people who have an immediate access to the job market and can actually have the right skills.
And do you think it's gotten more challenging as a result of digital transformation? It's become harder for students, graduates to sort of get good jobs?
Yeah, well, I'm living it now because my oldest just graduated and he's looking for a job, and he's like literally firing off, applications, I don't know, like 20 a week or so. It's gotten harder, no question about it. It's gotten harder, and I think it's gotten harder for two reasons. One is the requirements of employers are much more specific. There are specific skills that people need to have, and we're hearing it all the time. And as we said before, the second reason is the system has been very slow to adapt to these requirements. So the gap is getting bigger, and frankly, it's going to get worse before it's going to get bigger with demographic changes that we're seeing as well.
I like to point to cybersecurity as a great example of this, where entry-level jobs, quote-unquote entry-level jobs in cybersecurity, often outline a set of credentials, certifications that would, require years of experience in order to get that job. So cybersecurity was one of the first areas where you've really launched a focused skills initiative. So maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah, we did, and we felt that the problem was so urgent and we were not fast enough. We acquired a company by the name of InfoSec. We're very happy with the acquisition. Fact of the matter is there's 600,000 open jobs for cybersecurity entry level. You do not need a college degree, but you need specific skills, and the specific skills are tradable. And that's what we're doing, and we are training even to the specific demands of the employer, because not every cybersecurity job is the same, depending on the employer that you work for. So it's been a tremendously, both for us successful as well as rewarding journey on cybersecurity.
Can you talk about maybe the outcomes or early outcomes that you're seeing? Yeah,
we're going to publish the outcomes. I mean, I'm a big believer, since I'm fairly critical of the existing system. I'm a big believer. I got to, hold myself and ourselves accountable for outcomes as well. So we will publish the outcomes. Did they get a job? How long did they get the job? How much money did they make? Very simple outcomes. I don't want to get too academic. I mean, people can always get confused about outcomes discussions. We're seeing very positive outcomes on those three dimensions, and we'll publish it very shortly.
I like to talk about this. There's a skills gap, but there's also an experience gap. And oftentimes we see employers removing degree requirements from job descriptions, but adding experience, the equivalent of experience requirements, which may not make it even better for may not improve the situation for the candidate. InfoSec it's skills training, right, and certifications and so forth. Yeah. Could you imagine a world where Cengage is in the business of also sort of helping to bridge the experience gap?
Absolutely.
As well?
I think you're spot on. I think we cannot just replace one requirement with another requirement and not offer people opportunities to get to that. And I'm a big believer that we have compartmentalized education into neat little boxes. 2-year, 4-year, cost is this, here's what you got to see. This is not the reality anymore that we should strive for. It should be intertwined. You have work experience. I mean, I saw it for myself. When I understand why I'm learning something, I'm actually learning it. When I don't get it, like when I studied first math, I didn't know why I was learning it, and I was struggling more than anything. So I think intertwining the experience with the education and making it flexible. People can do it at night for an hour and a half or 2 hours. People can do it on the weekends, whenever they want to do it. I think is a direction that we absolutely will go with Cengage work.
Yeah, I mean, cybersecurity, you can only learn so much in the classroom. right?
Absolutely.
You actually have to sit there in front of all of the, software as a tier one analyst and actually see what's going on.
Absolutely, you see what's going on. You have an alarm go off, and then what do you do, right?
Exactly.
And it's you can't simulate that.
So work integrated learning, internship, apprenticeship. You have a separate initiative called Ready to Hire. Tell us about that.
Well, I think Raya is in the audience who's leading it. She's over there, so she's the real expert. I'm just the spokesperson, as it were. It is exactly along the lines, Ryan, of what you said before. We're trying to close the last mile, which is the mile from education to employer. And instead of producing talent and then hoping that they're going to get a job, what Raya and the team are doing is we're connecting directly with the employer and saying, what do you need? And what do we have? And just to give you an example, I mean, we are teaching 11 million higher ed students every year, and we have digital connections with them. We know how they learn, we know what they're good at. And in our workforce skills, we have many of them that don't pursue a degree, but they pursue a certificate. So we know all this information. So it's really the last mile, the matchmaking between the job and the talent. And that's what we're building with that business.
Fantastic. What an incredible example of how a sort of legacy publisher or education business can actually begin to solve real workforce
It's not
challenges.
easy, but yes, we're doing it.
So it's not easy, but as far as I know, no other traditional publisher has begun to travel down. I mean, Pearson has some workforce assets, but why do you think other publishers haven't begun this journey yet?
Look, on the one hand, I'm happy that they don't, because then we have the playing field for ourselves for a while. But the reality is there are lots of other competitors. I think that the reasons are you have to overcome an inherent bias in an organization. And the inherent bias, we were focused on higher ed. And we were part of the system where people felt pretty comfortable until we made ourselves uncomfortable. And that's what we did. And we challenged ourselves and we say, is it good enough? And as you said, it was a long journey, but I think I'm extremely proud of the organization, and I'm extremely proud of so many people, so many of my 4,500 colleagues that have really rallied to that cause.
Completely. I mean, I always talk about the fact that the paradigm that we're used to is that the risk is all on the student. It's the student's responsibility to take a financial risk, take the employment risk. And the reality is that we have hundreds, if not thousands, of sectors of the economy where there's a talent gap right now. And if you're seeking to be upskilled in one of those areas and someone's asking you to take a financial risk or an employment risk, certainly a financial risk, then they have either a bad business model or an unimaginative business model, because there's a very willing payor for that upskilling, and that's the employer that can't find the talent. So
Absolutely.
It means revolving the system around the employer as opposed to around the student, an employer pay model rather than a student pay
Absolutely,
model.
an employer pay model. And I mean, Raya can speak to this. We have yet to meet an employer that is not willing to say, I am going to pay for the education of this individual if you can guarantee me that she or he knows the skills that are required, that are specific to this job in my company, and you can guarantee me that that person stays at least 12 months. These are the requirements. Then they're willing to pay. Should be solvable, right?
It eliminates the risk.
Should be
for the
solvable,
employer.
absolutely.
Yeah. In my book, I talk about how Germany has a much more balanced system in terms of launching careers than the US. Just as an example, we spend $400 billion of public money a year subsidizing accredited colleges and universities. We spend less than 400 million on apprenticeship. So that's 1,000 to 1 ratio. We're more at a balance than any other developed country in that regard. Do you see the pendulum in the US swinging back to a more balanced approach?
I see the pendulum swinging back. I would give a very strong health warning about the comparison to the German system. The German system has been in existence since Bismarck, i.e. 1876. It is very unique to this environment. And there are so many players that are so aligned with this system, you can't just plug and play. You can't just take it over here and think it's going to work. Some German companies like Siemens, BMW, Mercedes believed that they could do it. They all failed. So,
or they do it, it's just incredibly expensive.
It's incredibly expensive, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
The beauty about the American the American system, and frankly, why I came here 38 years ago, is it's full of innovation, it's full of risk takers, and companies can be started, and the people are willing to challenge the status quo. And what I see in the US happening is that the balance is shifting because of initiatives of employers and companies. Once you are invested in our pivot, those companies will make the difference. And that is much more in line with, I think, the American spirit and the American dream, rather than trying to replicate another system.
In terms of policy, are you looking for policy changes, or you think that the market's going to solve this problem?
Well, it's interesting. We have continuous dialogue with policymakers in Washington to the extent that that is possible. And I do think they are also caught in the old paradigm, right? I mean, things get approved because you only get money if you actually sit in an actual college, or there are requirements you can't do online, etc. So we are lobbying very hard to not make it too restrictive and make it more open to these alternatives. But it's an ongoing dialogue.
What do you imagine career launch will look like for your grandchildren?
I'm first concerned about my children right now. So.
Children are launching careers now.
Exactly.
So they're launching, and my kids are also launching in the current system. But
yeah.
In 10 or 20 years, how do you think most young Americans will sort of launch their careers?
I would hope that, and I am actually confident because I'm an optimist, that there will be multiple ways for people to launch their career and have a fulfilling life. It's not just one way, or otherwise you're relegated to a second-class citizen. Stigmas hopefully will have decreased, not gone, but decreased. And people can find their fulfilled life in multiple ways. And this could be they never ever see a college, by the way, which 65% of high school graduates in the US never ever attempt to go to college. And of the 40% drop out of college. So it's only really for 25% right now working. So I think there are going to be multiple avenues that lead to a really fulfilling middle-class life and income.
One thing that I've talked about is how we have this orthodoxy of high school, then college, then career. And that leads to a bit of information asymmetry, or a lot of information asymmetry, where colleges and universities are enrolling students that they probably know, they should know, are not going to be successful in this program. So they have the information. The student, though, has no idea.
Yep.
Right? But the reality is that if they were to work for a couple of years and develop a better sense of their capabilities and interests, they'd probably make a better decision around that post-secondary program.
No question.
So sort of flipping the script, and instead of high school to college to work, high school some work, or work integrated learning to work might be a better pathway.
Absolutely, and this is exactly this example, Ryan. What I meant is it's convenient for the people that operate the system, right? You go to middle school, you go to high school, then you go to college. Everybody knows their place in the system, but it doesn't work ultimately for the student or for the job seeker.
Right, and hopefully maybe that work-integrated learning, or short-term credentials or industry-recognized certifications could ultimately stack into degrees and keep some of those faculty members gainfully employed.
Absolutely, and I think it will ultimately stack, and there are some really good movements underway. Dr. Michael Lomax, who's the head of UNC, is on my board, and they are pushing it with historically black colleges to allow people not just, you got to get into college or not, but just allow you much more flexibility and then stack your credentials so that you ultimately can get a degree.
Yeah, well, the best of sort of skills-based learning experience, and then the core sort of cognitive skills, critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills, communication skills that you're going to need for the rest of your career.
Absolutely.
It's great. Well, Michael, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's great.
Thank you.